So good afternoon. We're here to talk about green energy and the power behind the circular economy. So I'm going to just give a little brief intro before we launch into our discussion to talk about what green power has to do with circularity. There is no circularity without green power. There are many promising developments ranging from progress in carbon removal technologies to osmotic energy, which is a harnessing of the energy captured when rivers meet the sea. But despite these advances, we still have a really long way to go before green energy can completely replace fossil fuels. US President Donald Trump and climate change deniers are not the only things to blame. Just this past weekend, executives of Germany's leading manufacturing and energy industries warned that green hydrogen is still far too expensive compared with other fuels, raising doubts over a key plank of the country's efforts to cut carbon emissions. The chief executive of German steel company ThyssenKrupp warned that unless the cost of hydrogen made from renewable energy falls, the company will have to resort to fossil fuels to run a steel plant that was supposed to be its flagship greenhouse gas emitter. It has laid a series of bold targets for producing and importing the fuel, but faced with sluggish economic growth and trade competition from China, Europe's biggest economy, Germany, is joining a broader global slowdown in its adoption. Today, coal-fired blast furnaces generate around 7% of Germany's total emissions, and the country has been at the forefront of a drive by the bloc for green hydrogen as it seeks to meet its goal of cutting emissions by almost 90% by 2040. But green hydrogen costs around €6 per kilo, close to double the cost of gray hydrogen produced from natural gas. Energy industry executives say expect that green hydrogen will rise to around €10 per kilo in 2030 due to rising regulatory costs and investment costs. So that's about 4 times the price of natural gas today. This panel will discuss the economics of green energy, concrete actions that can change the current dynamic, and some promising ways forward. Just to kind of put all of this into context, let's talk about the people that we're lucky enough to have here with us on the panel today. So to my immediate right, Karen Thelen. She's the Managing Director of Regional Energy Transition at Stadtwerke München, or SWM for short, which is a lot easier for me to pronounce, a 125-year-old utility that provides, among other things, the city of Munich with electricity, heating, cooling, public transportation, and telecommunications. Next to her, we have Bastian Gierull, who's the CEO of Octopus Energy Germany, a renewable energy group that provides green energy to 5 European countries. We are also have with us Stefan Garbe. He's a co-founder of Flare, which is a Munich-based air capture technology company and a rising star on the Europe scale-up scene. And last but certainly not least, Saskia Bruysten, partner and co-founder international of Carbon Equity. It's an investment company that enables individuals to use their capital to fight climate change and become co-owners of the net zero economy. So let's dive into our panel discussion. And Stefan, I'd like to start with you. Tell us a little bit about Flare's technology and its traction to date.
So Flare's vision is to create a carbon negative future, and this we do through separating CO2 from the air and storing it permanently underground. And this we do through a new groundbreaking technology, which is the so-called hydrolyzer. The hydrolyzer is powered by energy, salt, and water, and produces acid and bases. And then the base is used to basically be fed over a big absorber where it gets into contact with a lot of air. It absorbs the CO2 from the air to store it in the form of a carbonate. And then in the next step, we use the acid, so the second product of the hydrolyzer, to desorb the carbonate in form of CO2 again. And then we work with partners that would then store the CO2 in caverns or in underground sediments. Yeah.
Okay, just to put this into context, just give us a couple of headlines about your traction to date. How much money have you raised?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we have raised around 15 million in venture capital money. Also, we have now installed 2 pilots, each with a capacity of 10 tons of CO2 per year. One here in Ismaning, very close to Munich at our base facility, and the second one in Canada. And now we have secured actually a quite large offtake from the so-called Frontier Consortium, which is a consortium of buyers of carbon credits, Shopify, Google, Stripe, of 30,000 tons of CO2 that will be removed up to 2030. So we start 2027, each year 20,000 tons of CO2. And since you also need to do the whole life cycle assessment, we built a machine that does 30,000 tons per year removal capacity.
Well, that's very encouraging. Saskia, let me turn to you. Beyond carbon capture technologies, what type of new technologies are you investing in?
Yeah, maybe taking a step back. So at Carbon Equity, we have the mission to, on the one hand, get more capital from private sources into these great climate solutions, like Flare, who's an indirect portfolio company. Octopus Energy is also an indirect portfolio company of ours. And on the other hand, we want to make sure that more people can invest into these crucial climate solutions. So that's why we exist, basically, as a company. And we do that by investing in the top venture capital and private equity funds that are powering those solutions, because unfortunately still too little capital is actually flowing towards those solutions. And so that's the reason why we exist. In terms of where we invest, I mean, we're the world's most active climate tech fund investor. So we see all the technologies out there. And if you think about decarbonization, it's a pretty big pie, because we basically have to decarbonize the whole economy. Everything that we do right now has to be decarbonized. And so what that means is we need to think about where we live, how we, what the emissions from buildings, how can we decarbonize that, the way we produce things, the way we get from A to B, what we eat, all of those things need to be changed. So you can imagine there is so much innovation, there are so many incredible companies in all of these various fields that actually lead to a net zero economy. So carbon capture and storage, and also carbon capture and utilization, which means taking the CO2 and making cool new products out of it, is just one small part. But we also invest indeed in new types of energy generation. So everyone knows solar, wind, and batteries, how we can create green energy, but not everyone knew about new ways of creating hydropower, like taking old oil drilling techniques and drilling deep into the earth and making industrial power through this, which is baseload power, so which is constant, or new nuclear power plants that exist out there as well. I also wanted to add that, we often think about climate tech as a space that is all about tree hugging. And I mean, we love trees and we love nature, and that's definitely one of the reasons why we exist. But it's really a topic that is now, particularly for Europe, of geopolitical importance, because we need to be independent in terms of our energy creation, because we don't have fossil fuels in Europe. And so we see that space is way more important from a geopolitical and strategic standpoint than people ever looked at it before. So, in other words, thousands of opportunities out there, and there's a lot of work to do.
Thanks a lot, Saskia. Karen, let me turn to you. Yes. What types of green energy is SWM using to power Munich? And what percentage of the electricity that you produce today is green? And what are your goals for the future?
Very good questions. And so I can just really resume where Saskia just stopped. I think we have nearly all the technologies in our portfolio. So You mentioned it earlier, Jennifer. We are maybe the most traditional company here on the panel. 125 years of energy transition is our DNA. So we just always shifted our facilities, our technology part from that time. So we have, for example, hydrogen power plants. We have even pumped hydrogen power plants. We have wind farms. We have solar parks. We also have the small scale things like heat pumps, rooftop PV systems, but also we have geothermal technologies we are using. So we have really a broad spectrum which we are using. And I also want to give you a beacon of light and hope, because 2009, we just started a really ambitious goal here in Munich in my company, but also with the city of Munich, to decarbonize our energy production. 2009 was 2 years before Fukushima happened. 2009 was still the time when sustainability and climate change was a niche topic. So at that time, my predecessors started this vision, and since that, we built 300 different power facilities, and we managed to go up from 5% green energy to 100% green energy, which is used in Munich. So it's not all our whole.
Did you hear that?
Yes.
Let's give that a nice round of applause.
Thank you for
We
this.
need the success stories.
This is really, you make it happen. So it was 16 years, really pushing hard, but it's possible to serve Munich and the energy consumption of Munich green. So, and we still have for sure some gas turbines for base load, but this is our goal to go on in the next years, because we will have an increasing energy demand in the next years with digitalization, also electric vehicles and so on. So there will be more things to do, but it's possible you can do it, and it's not only a vision, it's reality.
Bravo. Thank you. So, Bastian, tell us a little bit about how Octopus is bringing green energy to Europe.
So I think our main mission is, and we're very technology driven, but our main mission is to speed up the energy transition and make it cheaper for everyone, and especially bring it to all of the consumers out there. Usually when we talk about energy, and you started off with this, we end up talking about industry really quickly. And that is an important part, but just as important, even half of it, of the energy consumption is with consumers. Sure. And there's a lot that can happen today. We're already technologically at a point where we can flexibilize consumers and their consumption to help stabilize the grid, to take the excess of renewable energy out of the grid when it's there, and to balance it if it isn't there. So every year, like I think in 2023, there were, Germany-wide, we had 10 terawatts of energy from renewable, from wind, that needed to be curtailed, that was shut off, that we didn't use. This is basically free energy. We've got energy from wind turbines that is the cheapest energy we've had ever, and it's getting cheaper every year. But we've got an energy system that isn't ready to deal with it because it's stuck in the past, because it's stuck in the fossil fuel history that we've built around it. And so our main mission is to say, how can we get consumers with innovative tech and with engaging consumers, with making it fun and cheap and engaging for them to use energy in a way that will have more renewable energy, more convenience, and it's cheaper for everyone.
Okay, great. Well, so sticking with this topic of cost, Saskia, let me turn to you. I mean, in the intro, I talked about the concern of German industry about the cost differential between green hydrogen and natural gas. You invest in lots of other technologies. You know, price parity has been, and to some extent still is, a big issue for new green energy technologies. How far are we from price parity?
Yeah. Well, let's just be, I mean, maybe taking one step back again, like indeed, in Germany we constantly have this debate of Dunkelflaute, right? Like then where there's no wind and no solar, and like we talk about, oh, it's not possible, we now need to have gas-powered plants again, etc. in the end, the direction of travel is 100% clear. We are moving towards 100% renewables, and having some gas is there, let's say a blip on the road to, let's say, go fully green. In my eyes, that's how we see it. When you look at wind, solar, and batteries, they are completely at price parity. They're often cheaper. In many instances, they're actually cheaper, or they're even zero cost or even negative cost. So that's the first thing. That technology has fully arrived. If we look at some of the new technologies that I alluded to earlier, like geothermal, that is baseload power, so it doesn't go up and down like wind and solar does. Proper baseload power and nuclear, they're not yet at cost parity. But I want to be very clear, there is this exponential cost curve that I think many of you have probably seen of how solar, wind, and batteries over the last decade, every year have halved in cost. Like every year, 50% cheaper. Like last year, batteries were still almost 100% more expensive than they are this year. So if you think about this, that's exponential. And we as humans, we often can't think exponential. So it's very hard for us to imagine what it means if a cost declines in an exponential way. So that will also happen with those other technologies that are out there, because if you think about it right now, the energy demand is just going through the roof because of AI, data centers, etc., demanding all of this energy. So we will need to be innovative and drive those costs down. Otherwise, we'll just, explode as a planet. So that's going to happen. And therefore, even if things are today not at cost parity, they will very likely be there in 2, 3, 5 years. So that's how I want to reframe the debate. We might not be there with everything, but 10, 20 years ago, we couldn't have imagined that solar panels are this cheap as they are. 5 years ago, we couldn't have imagined that it is actually now possible to have electric long-haul trucks. That's completely standard nowadays. And so this is where we need to think more exponentially and just keep on putting the capital into those innovations.
And here I would really like Karin and Bastian to jump in. The fossil fuel lobby is always painting renewable energy as unreliable and expensive. Tell us why you don't think that's the case.
So I think Saskia, she already gave a lot of good arguments for it, and I can just confirm it. I think when we look back the last decade, we see a price drop at least of 80% for renewables like wind, solar, or storage. So this is for sure. And technology increasement, market dynamics, it showed that it's possible. So cost is not the issue we are talking about. Reliability, as I mentioned, so we are just serving a city with green energy. But what we just see in Germany, I think we have nearly reached a bit more than 50% of green energy in the electricity market. The system you mentioned earlier, Bastian, is still working like the fossil production system. So in the fossil production system, we have centralized power plants, which then have a transmission grids, and then we have distribution grids. So we come from high voltage to medium to low voltage. And the difference with renewable energies is that it's decentralized production. Mm-hmm. So we have the production units, the facilities at the clients. So, and you see it's the opposite direction of the highway, yeah? So we have to go backwards. And this is then also what Bastian mentioned before. And the best thing is to use the energy directly at the point where it's produced. So, but we can for sure not use everything decentralized. We have to have storage, we have to have new technologies where we create some intermediates which we can fuel later on, so on. And for sure we have to work on the system, on the grids, to transport the energy which is produced decentralized.
But as a traditional utility, you
Yes.
would argue that it makes business sense?
It makes business sense because, as I mentioned about our stories, we invested around a bit more than 4 billion euros for this transition we did in renewables. And it's really an important pillar in our annual revenue, what we are earning from these plants. And at least we also regained nearly the whole amount which we invested, and we still have the assets. So it is definitely a business model, business impact. So it's not only about tree hugging or climate change and sustainability. It's really a business case which is counting. And so I can just really confirm this.
And maybe just, I just wanted to add, I mean, like, of course, our, electricity grid is pretty old school because it's made for the fossil industry. And we've seen that, earlier this year when we had that Spain-Portugal outage that showed, like, exposed the vulnerability of our old school nets. But the cool thing is, we're now investing like crazy as Germany in this, right? Like there's been a big pot of money allocated, I think something like 500 billion also to infrastructure, of which a certain part is green infrastructure. And the second thing is, we're in a DLD discussion, so it's always going to be about AI. There are tons of AI companies that are now being used to optimize the grid usage and thereby ensuring that ups and downs in energy flow can be optimized so that in an old school grid, you can push through something like 30 to 40% more energy through the same old grid just because it has the right AI operating system to make that happen. So again, those innovations are around. We just need to start using them.
Yes. And Bastian, I want to talk about how this works on the ground with your company and consumers.
So, yeah, I hate that fossil fuel lie that's been told to us for generations. The interesting thing, AI is a solution, but it even works today. So today, the situation we have today is in the UK, where we're the biggest energy supplier, we've got in one grid area, we've got 1.5 million people that every year join what we call saving sessions. And this is where the grid operator informs, through us as an energy supplier, the customers, that there's a time coming up where there's a potential brownout or there's definitely not enough renewable energy in the grid to fill demand. Now, what usually happens is gas power turbines are turned on to sort of substitute for that. These are exceptionally expensive because they're basically idling or standing around and then they just turn on for this. Carbon emission is terrible for these gas turbines. So rather than turning on these gas turbines, we're now taking customers in all walks of life, so small apartments, anywhere in the city, also with flexible assets and cars, but everyone can join. And they'll just, in that time frame, will reduce their energy consumption, and they get paid for this. So there's a financial incentive for them. And they manage to reduce 200 megawatts in those hours, sometimes 250, which is the equivalent output of that gas turbine. So instead of having to turn on that gas turbine when we have times where we don't have enough renewable energy, we can activate consumers. We've done this now 3 or 4 years in a row. It works every time. It's during the winter month we have maybe 10, maybe 12 sessions like this. And we usually manage to flex 1 to 1.9 gigawatts, which is sort of the energy output roughly of a nuclear power station. And this is without tech already. Like, this can happen today. It's been happening for the last 4 years. And people love it. They get paid for it. And we don't need to turn on a gas power station. And now, following that up, like the next few steps along, we already have solutions where Octopus has homes that have PV on the roof, that have a heat pump, that have a battery, that have a smart meter. And our tech platform manages these buildings in such a way that the generation, the consumption, selling, and taking energy from the grid is managed that people in these homes pay €0 for their energy and for their heating. And not just once a month or once a year, but for the next 6 to 10 years, prospectively. We guarantee it. Wow. That is the future that not only we're building, but that's existing today. And this is the core lie of the fossil fuel industry that's told us switching to renewables is going to be more expensive and less convenience. And the reality is it's going to be cheap and it's going to be hell convenient.
Yeah.
Wow. That's really... Okay, so Saskia, I want to go back to your fund and play off of what Bastian just said about the role of consumers, the role of individuals in bringing us to a society that can be sustained by green energy alone. Talk about a little bit about how your fund is allowing individuals and not just, venture capital funds to play a role in investing in the companies that are going to bring about this future.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so as I mentioned, we started carbon equity both because we wanted more capital to go to the green transition solutions, but also that we wanted to have more people to be able to invest in this. Why? Because I myself, my co-founders, we've often felt ourselves just overwhelmed by the enormity of this massive problem, which is climate change, which is, let's say, our generation's largest problem. We think we're just thinking about war right now, but this is actually the thing that's probably going to kill us. And so we thought that, well, it's not just the biggest problem, but it's also the biggest investment opportunity, and we need to invest in that. But the problem is currently, if you think about it, most investors, so 99% of the investors, currently have access to the public market. They can invest on the stock exchange. They can buy an ETF. But 99% of the climate companies that are like the octopuses, the flares of this world, they're not yet stock listed. There are very few out there that are stock listed. So we thought, there's a gap. These cool companies are not funded by the stock market, and these cool investors want to invest there, but they can't. So we said, let's build that bridge. Let's bring those two sides together and create a digital platform that connects those two sides. And so that's basically what we did and why we exist. And why do we think that's so important? Because we think if people, and maybe one step back, so we're allowing people already as of 20,000 euros to invest in this climate private equity field, which typically in Germany you can only invest in those types of funds as of 200,000 because it's a regulated type of investment. And we allow that already as of 20,000. So that significantly lowers the barrier of people to get in and creates a whole new pocket of additional capital that otherwise could have not fled into this type of assets. And so we believe that this is a way to actually make people more motivated. They can see, oh, this is actually working. They can actually look at individual companies and say, how cool, this is such a great success. And this will activate people in a way that they can be positive actors in this green transition rather than saying I anyway can't do anything, I'm not rich, I'm not a politician, etc. It makes them active participants and therefore motivated to ensure that, let's say, our democracies will survive. Let me put it that way.
Thank you, Saskia. And so let's be clear. In order for these newer technologies, like the one that Flare is developing, to thrive and scale to the point where they actually can provide enough power for all of it to be green, everyone has a role to play. So I'd like to touch briefly, Stefan, on the role that Frontier is playing. You mentioned earlier this group that was formed by McKinsey, Alphabet, Meta, Shopify, and Stripe. They've made an over 1 billion advance market commitment to purchase permanent carbon removal before 2030. So talk about the importance to your company of offtake agreements and the role of traditional old economy corporates in making this happen.
So they're super important for us since there's currently really no incentive for the second or third scope emissions, so meaning emissions that are not directly coming from the industry itself, so meaning, so to say, offset flights, offset data centers, as you say. So these companies basically serve this voluntary market and buy carbon credits also from small companies to create the market for the future where that is absolutely necessary since currently there's no incentive, no regularities for this second and third scope emissions. We have in the EU the so-called European Trade Scheme, which is covering emissions from industries like steel, aluminium, waste incineration, and so on. But second and third scope emissions are still missing, and those companies play a significant contribution to serve these markets. And I think we need this more and more, that sustainability departments of this of big companies create this market and buy carbon credits. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So clearly, everyone has a role to play in making this happen. We're almost out of time, and I want each of you, like in 10 seconds, to say, like, what is the one, like, give your call to action. What is the one change that you want to see to make things, you know, to make a real change so that we have green energy? Karen?
So energy transition is not a vision. It's happening. It's reality. We don't need a restart. We just have to push from ambition to acceleration. I think this is important. It's our common thing to do. We can only do it together, and we have to get all the system moving. So I think this is the important part.
Bastian, your call to action.
Energy transition is happening. We need to let go of the past, of the fossil fuel past, and embrace a system change that will help us bring cheap and renewable energy to everyone.
Thank you.
Energy transition means innovation. So new companies going out there, taking the opportunity, creating new business models to make it attractive to go into the renewable path.
Saskia, you've got the last word.
Let's put our money where our mouths are. We all want to have a green future, so let's put our money there. Let's do it.
Okay, thank you very much. Please give our panelists a nice round of applause.